Welcome to this episode of Heffron on History. Today is Thomas Jefferson's birthday, so we're going to have a little chat about Thomas Jefferson today. I recently finished reading a book called Thomas Jefferson's Garden Book, and it gave real insight into the mind of Thomas Jefferson. What was going through his mind at any one point in time in his life, specifically related to the gardens at Monticello, but this book gave even more insight into kind of his everyday life and his everyday thinkings. What was going on in his mind? So, on this episode of Heffron on History. All right, so Thomas Jefferson's Garden Book. Thomas Jefferson kept several different journals. He kept a book about what was being planted in his gardens at Monticello. He kept a book that was his account book that covered all the expenses, income and expenses that he had through his various plantations. He had a farm book specifically about what he was raising as cash crops. And this book, however, you'll have to pardon me if I'm looking down, that's where my notes are. This book was edited by Professor Edwin Morris Betts back in the 1940s. And what Professor Betts did is he took the garden book. Now this is a rather thin book. It's only 66 pages long. Most of the pages are not even written on. My gosh, there's a lot of information in the garden book that I have the video, the picture of. There's a lot more in there because what Professor Betts did is he took all of the information from the garden book, he took all the information from the account book, all the information from the farm book, and then he looked at all the correspondence that Thomas Jefferson had with various people over the years, anything to do with gardening, and he compiled them into one place. Thomas Jefferson's Garden Book. This is a rather thick book. It has a lot of pages in it. And it has, because it's everything to do with gardening, it has some surprises in it. Things that you would not expect. The President of the United States, the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the man who created the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, things for him to be talking to other people about. You would think that he would be fixated on the issues of the presidency, for instance, but he wasn't. And we'll go over some of those in a second here. All right, so the focus on the garden book. It talks about his passion for plants. Now, he had a passion for plants from not only an agricultural viewpoint, but also an ornamental viewpoint. He had a passion for plants, and he just had to have every plant that he could get his hands on. He was getting seeds and bare root plants and potted plants from all over the world. And they were being sent to Thomas Jefferson at Monticello. They were being sent to him wherever he was, and he was also sharing that information, sharing those seeds, sharing those plants with other people. So he had a passion for all these different types of plants. He had a passion for cash crops, things that he could grow at Monticello to make money. So one of the things he seemed to be rather focused on was finding a rice that would grow at Monticello. Now, rice grows, it's a great cash crop that grows along the East Coast, but Monticello is in the mountains. And so he's trying to find a rice that grows with very little water. Monticello is on top of a hilltop. That's right, it's on top of a mountain, a small mountain. Monticello means small mountain. And there's no water. They have to bring water from down the slopes. So to have a rice growing in an area where there is no readily available source of water is a problem. So he's trying desperately to try and find a rice that will grow in those conditions. He's trying to find the best apple. He's trying to find the best grape. He's trying to find the best peach. He's trying to find trees that will produce either wood or produce fruits that can be used for commercial processes. Now he has a passion for flowers. He has a passion for plants. He has this desire to get everything that he possibly can to grow at Monticello. So he's constantly getting plants and he's experimenting with them at Monticello. He spends time in England, he spends time in France, and he sees the formal gardens because he's in those two countries. He's operating amongst the elite and the kings of those countries, right? And so he's seeing the best formal gardens in France and England, and he's taking those ideas and he's putting them to good use at Monticello. We tend to think of Thomas Jefferson in terms of the Declaration of Independence, a President of the United States, the Louisiana Purchase, Lewis and Clark. We tend to think of Thomas Jefferson in those terms. But he had a passion for other things. And one of the really interesting aspects of this book is it's written chronologically, right? So in date order. And then when you read the sections around those historic events, you'll find there's other things going on in his mind. And I'll give an example. During the time when the Declaration of Independence was being written, right, he's locked away in a room by himself, and if memory serves me correct, it takes him like 13 days to write the Declaration of Independence. Well, he's doing other things too. One would think that would be the thing he's fixated on, but he takes a break every now and then to do some other things. For example, while he's writing the Declaration of Independence, he takes some time. There must have been some type of a sideshow in town, because he took some time to go see a monkey. Monkeys don't live in North America, so it would be appropriate that if you want to go see a monkey and then what happens to be in town, you're going to go see the monkey. On July 4th, the date that we all celebrate as Independence Day, and the Declaration of Independence is being signed and all that, Thomas Jefferson is shopping. He is buying ladies' gloves, and he's buying a thermometer to record temperatures at Monticello. And he spends time that day going around town and recording the temperature. That's not something you would expect to have happen on July 4th, but that's what he was doing. One thing that I learned about Thomas Jefferson through reading the Garden Book is the man was very often obsessed. He would get absolutely obsessed with certain things to the point where that's all he really focused on. The rice was a good example of that. Another one is his love of peas. The man was obsessed with peas, of all goofy things to be obsessed with. Every year he wrote down when the peas were planted, and he wrote down when they came to the table. Because people would come from miles around to visit, right? You would go to Monticello to visit, and he would go to other plantations to visit, and people apparently in the Monticello area were obsessed with peas, to the point where they had a contest every year to find out who could have the peas come to the table the earliest, and whoever had them first would throw a party, and everybody would come to their house to enjoy the first crop of peas for the year. One might say that Thomas Jefferson is an absent micromanager. Those two things don't go together. He's a micromanager. He wants to know exactly what's going on. He wants to say in exactly what's going on at any one point in time at Monticello, but he's seldom at Monticello because he's in Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence, or he's in Paris, or he's in Washington. He's always seems to be someplace besides Monticello. So even though he has very specific things that he's talking to his overseers about, I want you to get this and this and this done this year. I want you to put this here and put this here and plant these plants here and plant these plants here, and I'm sending you some seeds and I'm sending you some plants, and I expect them to be taken care of and I expect them to be planted. He even goes as far as to say which slaves should be put to work in which areas, right? Who should be working in the field this year? Who should be working in the orchard this year? Who should be working in the mill this year? Who should be building that dam? Who should be working on this road? So he's a micromanager, but he's seldom at Monticello. So he has to rely, on his son-in-law and his daughter to help him maintain law and order on his plantation. But he also has to have he goes through a number of overseers trying to find the right one to do what he wants, and which must have been a rather interesting thing to be an overseer for Thomas Jefferson, because he gave rather vague orders, but very specific, and it's really kind of a weird combination. Interesting topics that comes to light in the garden book is that there's a lot of emphasis put on money-making projects at Monticello. He admits he's not the greatest businessman. He's relying on the overseers to take care of the crops at Monticello and the different business situations that he has going on, right? So he has cash crops. He's growing plants that he can sell. At some point he's growing some cotton, at some point he's growing some tobacco, at some point he's trying different plants in order to get them to make him some money. He has a nail making operation. Of all things to do to have business, he has his slaves making nails, like building material nails. He has a couple of mills for grinding grains. He has a couple of mills, and they seldom make any money. So money seems to always be a problem at Monticello. Now, here's one of the interesting things about that. Very few of the things that he is doing to make money are bringing in cash money, because he is bartering for everything. He barters with his neighbors for plants. He barters with his neighbors for materials to make the nails. He barters with people for everything. And another example of that, his overseer is paid a little bit in cash for the year, but in a large part of the overseer's income is pork. I'm giving you so much pork per year to eat. That's a really big part of their income. I'm going to conclude the Thomas Jefferson's garden book by looking at the complexities of plants. He is obsessed with plants. He wants to get as many plants as he possibly can. He wants to get them to Monticello. He wants to get them to his friends. He wants to get them to his neighbors, and he wants to share them with everyone, right? One of the interesting stories to read about is the Lewis and Clark expedition. They are sending him from the western part of the United States, what will become the United States. They're sending him seeds and live plants. And that makes me wonder, how did they ship plants back in the day? I can understand how you would ship seeds, and I can understand how you would ship perhaps bare root cuttings. But if it's summertime, how do you ship plants? You can't bare root them and expect them to survive. So that's an interesting topic of the garden book. He never really gets into. He never really talks about exactly how these plants are being shipped. By the way, there is no U.S. Postal Service that as we know it today, especially before the country was here, right? Ben Franklin was kind of in charge of the postal service in the early days, but it's not like it is today, right? The mailman doesn't just come to your house. So how exactly do they ship? I got some really good insight as the years were progressing. In this book, he would send his slaves to go to town, right? He would expect a ship to arrive in, let's say in Richmond, and he would have to send somebody to go pick up a box of plants. He would have to send somebody to go pick up a packet of seeds. Plants would arrive at his favorite nurseryman, at their location, and he would have to send somebody to go pick them up, or somebody would be obliged to pick them up for him. It's really interesting to look at how that day-to-day process actually worked back in Thomas Jefferson's day. So, if you have never read The Garden Book of Thomas Jefferson, I highly recommend it. Until next time, have fun on history.